You know, there's one financial document that can tell you way more about a company's real strategy than any fancy press release. Today, we're going to follow the money and uncover the true story hidden in a company's cash.
Okay, so let's start with a big question. Imagine a company's just crushing it, hitting the headlines with record profits, quarter after quarter. Seems like they're unstoppable, right? But what if I told you that same company could be teetering on the edge of bankruptcy?
Well, the answer is yes. Absolutely. It's happened before, and it will definitely happen again. And the whole reason comes down to one crucial difference: the difference between profit on paper and actual spendable cash in the bank. You got to remember, profit is an opinion, but cash is a fact. So how do we get this reality check? Well, it's a tool called the statement of cash flows. Think about it like this. If the income statement is kind of like the company's curated social media profile, the story they want to tell, then the statement of cash flows is the unedited, behind-the-scenes footage. It's their real bank statement, showing every single dollar that comes in and every dollar that goes out. All right, let's dive into our first section, decoding a company's investments. This is where we see one of the most important stories that cash tells us, how a company is actually investing in its own future. We're talking the big bets, right? The major purchases of things like buildings and equipment, all the stuff that's supposed to fuel growth for years to come. Okay, and this is where things get a little tricky. And honestly, it's where a lot of people get tripped up. When a company sells off a big asset, say an old factory, the income statement shows a gain or a loss. But here's the thing, that's just an accounting number. It's not real money. It's got all sorts of non-cash stuff baked in, like depreciation. The statement of cash flows, though, it just cuts right through all that noise and asks one simple, beautiful question. How much cold, hard cash actually hit the bank account from that sale? Okay, let's make this real with an example. We've got Knox Co., and they sell off a piece of equipment. Now, the paperwork gives us its original cost, how much it's depreciated, and the gain they made on the sale. But notice what's missing? The most important piece of the puzzle. How much cash did they actually get? All right, here's how we crack the case. It's a pretty straightforward two-step process. You can see it right here. First up, we need to figure out the book value. What's the asset actually worth on the company's books? Simple. We take the original cost, $20,000, and we subtract all that accumulated depreciation, which is $12,000. That leaves us with a book value of $8,000. Then for step two, we just add that $5,000 gain from the sale. That gain is just a fancy way of saying they sold it for $5,000 more than what it was worth on their books. And voila, that brings us to our magic number, $13,000. That's the actual cash inflow from investing. And it's the only number from this whole deal that's going to show up in the investing section of the statement of cash flows. See, that's the number that really matters. Okay, so we know companies are making these big investments to grow their business. But where does that money actually come from? Well, that leads us right into our next section, following the funding. This part of the statement is all about financing activities. Basically, it's the story of how a company gets its money, either by issuing stock to investors or taking on debt from lenders. And just as important, it shows how they pay that money back, whether it's through paying out dividends or repaying their loans. This section tells you a ton, like is the company leaning on outsiders to fund its growth, or is it a cash machine that's generating enough on its own to pay back its investors? And here is a little pro tip for you, a really important rule for this section. Companies are not allowed to just show you the net result. No way. They have to report the cash they received and the cash they paid out separately. So, any money they get from issuing new stock? That gets its own line item. Cash they paid out to shareholders as dividends? That gets its own line too. This transparency is absolutely key because it lets you see exactly how the money is flowing. All right, get ready for a bit of a plot twist. It turns out some of a company's biggest, most strategic moves don't involve any cash at all. And because of that, they don't even show up in the main body of the statement. These are the hidden deals that you have to go hunting for in the footnotes. So you're probably thinking, what kind of massive event could possibly be missing from a statement that's supposed to be all about cash? Well, we're talking about transactions that can totally change the future of the company, but since no cash actually changes hands right then and there, they have to be disclosed separately. So what are we talking about here? Well, check out some of these examples. A company might buy a whole new factory, not with cash, but by giving the seller new shares of its stock. Or maybe they convert a huge pile of debt into equity, just wiping it off the books. They could even get a building donated to them as a gift. I mean, these are massive strategic moves, and the only way you'll find out about them is by digging into those disclosures.
The source material we're looking at really nails why this is so important. It says, and I'm quoting here, these events may be very important for a potential investor to know about. And they're not kidding. I mean, if you knew a company was funding all of its big projects by just printing more stock, that tells you your own piece of the pie, your ownership stake, could be getting smaller and smaller. That is absolutely critical information to have.
Okay, so we've looked at how companies invest their cash, how they get their funding, and even these hidden non-cash deals. So what's the big picture here? What's the one final takeaway you really need to remember from all this? It's this. The statement of cash flows is so much more than just a boring financial report. It's a strategic blueprint. It cuts through all the marketing fluff and the press releases to show you the real-world consequences of a company's past decisions. And it gives you a much, much clearer picture of where they're headed in the future. So I'll leave you with this one last thought. The next time you're scrolling through the news and you see a big, flashy headline about a company's record-breaking earnings, you'll know there's a deeper story to tell. And you'll know the first and most important question you need to ask is, that's cool, but show me the cash.